Bonjour à toutes et à tous. Nous nous retrouvons ce matin pour un nouvel épisode de Mapping the Next Steps, notre rendez-vous en ligne et interactif pour échanger ensemble sur les enjeux artistiques et culturels de l'Europe aujourd'hui. Et comme vous le savez, le jeudi 24 février à 5h55, le gouvernement de Russie a lancé une offensive militaire contre l'ensemble du territoire ukrainien et élargissant ainsi un conflit ouvert il y a 8 ans. Et cette guerre dure maintenant depuis 44 jours. Et cette guerre est extrêmement brutale. On parle aujourd'hui de crimes de guerre, de viols, d'exécutions de civils. Et cette guerre risque d'être longue. Et face au risque de lassitude de notre regard et d'affaiblissement de notre attention, notre souhait est d'approfondir avec vous ce matin et de partager ce que l'on pourrait appeler des archives sensibles du temps présent. Et donc, nous poursuivrons cette démarche le temps de ce conflit. Et notre première émission de mars a ouvert cet espace d'écoute, d'attention et de réflexion en soulevant plusieurs questions. Qu'entendons-nous réellement de cette guerre et de l'expérience de celles et ceux qui la vivent? Quelles sont les voix manquantes? Comment interroger le silence et narrer le présent dans sa pluralité et sa complexité? Et comment décontaminer nos esprits, nos mots et nos actions? Nous poursuivons aujourd'hui cette conversation et nous avons choisi pour cette deuxième émission de continuer d'être à l'écoute du conflit, de son vécu, des récits personnels d'Ukrainiennes et d'Ukrainiens. Et à cette occasion, nous partageons le plateau avec les membres du collectif de recherche Beyond the Post-Soviet, avec qui nous avons co-conçu et avec lesquels nous co-animerons cette émission. Et donc nous avons en ligne avec nous ce matin Sasha Pevak.
Good morning.
Bonjour Sasha. Également Patricia Couvet.
Bonjour.
Bonjour Patricia. And also Yulia Fisch.
Bonjour.
Bonjour, good morning. Et également avec nous sur le plateau, également en ligne, donc nos collègues de Relais Culture Europe. Et donc en ligne, Pascal Brunet.
Bonjour.
Bonjour Pascal.
Bonjour Vincent. Bonjour à tous.
Également ici au studio avec nous, Laurence Barone.
Bonjour à tous et à toutes.
Et donc, pour la bonne compréhension des échanges avec nos invités, nous allons maintenant basculer en anglais. So, we are very glad to have all of you this morning with us for this session. And also, to start, yes, we would like to take this whole meeting also as an exercise. And perhaps, Pascal, if you could perhaps give some words about the principle of this meeting this morning, please.
Yes, two or three very simple principles. In our day-to-day work, we try to imagine form of exchanges and conversations that allow each of us to think about his or her actions in the context of the European and political frameworks that are being developed. This is a process, and this process is necessarily long and constant. We cannot create a common thought without time and feedback on our actions and our thought. Before building, it's necessary to think about the foundations. First of all, we must resist the habit of evacuating this effort of reflection of past, reflection of our values. We evacuate this value without precision. This constant process needs to be experienced every day. Democracy only wears out if it's not used. First of all, we have to listen, and it's what we will do today. We have to listen what the world is like now, the condition of existence of each person, as Bruno Latour says, condition of existence. It also means being precise. What was for what stories? What story of our present, but what story of our past? What precision when we relate the situation? What fairness in relation to ourselves or our personal stories? I believe, and we believe in Relais, that is around these working principles, and when we have prepared this today broadcast with Beyond the Post-Soviet and our colleagues, and thank you again for this cooperation, that this principle could guide us. That is allow us also to try to discuss, and it's difficult to talk about a war during a war, and it's what we will try today. So listen, it's a good gathering point, a good starting point to talk about politicals and public policies, and this is what we will try today with, I think, precision, but also empathy. We will try to do.
Thank you very much, Pascal. And now, Yulia, for the post-Soviet collective, the same question, please.
Thank you. Yes, we rarely consider listening and hearing as an act of labor or active process. However, it can act at the first step and approach to unlearn the models and frames that we are prone to, which in the way may replicate and exercise colonial and imperialist thinking and acting. And the language we use is already acting, since we translate, narrate, and change the way things are in the way we name it. So today, we aim to take the first step to unlearn the way we used to act, but also to listen and to hear. Along with that, we aim to contribute to creating the new decolonial vocabulary in a way. And to do so, we have decided to take today's session as an active exercise in the way we speak. Being attentive to the wording we apply, to the narration of the stories, to the introduction of ourselves, we strive today to reflect and observe on our own feelings when we speak and we hear. We allow us today to make mistakes in order to feel safe, but we are conscious about the care or carelessness that language we use can carry when speaking about the past and the present. And we are here today to learn from our guests and to work on the language we further can use and apply to the speaking about war, but also about the violence preceding this war that happened in the language and narration.
Okay, thank you very much, Julia, yes, to present us the principles of the meeting of this morning. And just before we start, we would like perhaps to introduce our both organizations. And so, Laurence, could you explain us why it is important for the Relais Culture Europe and in our activities to propose this type of content now?
Yes, just very briefly, because as Pascal was saying, our objective at the end is to constitute a common European cultural spaces, but maybe without taking for granted that it's natural, that is easy, or that it has been done. And in order to do this, we think that in order to build such a commons, or commons, plural commons, we need to deal with all the violence and conflict, deal with barriers, deal with said and unsaid, spoken and unspoken, and really to, as Julia was saying also, unlearning what we know, and learning the way to do it, and maybe learning another way to build such a space. And it starts by deep listening, gathering diversity, entering complexity, and that's why we are doing this space.
Thank you, Laurence. And now the side from the Beyond, from the post-Soviet collective, Patricia, could you also introduce your organization shortly, and why also it's important to have this work and propose such activities now?
I will thank you. I will start to say that we are only 3 here, but we are actually representing representing 50 people, or more than 50 people, curators, artists, researchers, and cultural workers around the geographical Europe, with the aim to reflect on the so-called post-Soviet sphere from Eastern Europe to Central Asia, taking the decolonial thinking, but also personal stories as sources of knowledge. And this is what we try to do today as well. Since its foundation in 2021, the collective has organized events in Paris, Berlin, Tashkent, Moscow, but also Lviv in Ukraine. And the sharing points of view are very important for us. We ask every time local guests, artists, to share their research through collective reading, screening, open discussion. On the 24th of February, we have planned a meeting for 1 week, 1 week ago, and our set of activities have since then changed. We now offer collective collaboration and coordination to support the Ukrainian local scene. Today, Beyond the Post-Soviet provides support for art workers in Ukraine and abroad, disseminate information, for example, with the website Contact for Ukrainians.art, but also promote the artistic Ukrainian scenes and work to preserve the works and archives of the artists, while also providing emergency financial assistance.
Thank you very much, Patricia, for this few words of presentation. And now, yes, with the Beyond the Post-Soviet collective, and for our first programs, we have thought that it was also very important to begin by listening to different testimonies and experiences of this war by citizens from the Ukrainian territory, as Pascal also introduced it. And we would like, yes, to propose you first to listen to personal testimonies of the war, which have been collected on the website www.february24.net and since the 24th of February. And these texts testify different situations from different places in Ukraine at the beginning of the conflict. And these testimonies have been recorded and will be read in Ukrainian by Jan Bashinsky, an Ukrainian artist, and in English by our colleague Florence Diez. And we propose you now, yes, to listen an abstract of Serhiy Voynailovich in Mykolaiv-Kyiv.
Другий день війни. Уривок. На пересадочній станції
So you have just a short technical program. We are trying, yes, to resolve it, and we come back to the listening of the first testimony. Thank you for your attention.
Сергій Войнайлович, Миколаїв-Київ. Другий день війни. Уривок. На пересадочній станції чекаємо потяг. Він запізнюється на годину, 2, 3, 4, 5. Спимо з кимось по черзі. Батько перейшов на українську, я за ним. Шлю аудіоповідомлення, як я звучу. Вона сміється і каже, що дуже класно. Приходить останнє повідомлення від С з Бучі. Вона питає, чи їй пробувати виїжджати. Просить залишатися на зв'язку. Потяг прибуває, але йде не до міста, що мені потрібно. Лише до Кривого Рогу. Далі як хочете. Хто хоче сідає, я теж. В половини людей в вагоні сіли телефони. Майже всі хочуть в Херсон та Каховку. Каховка окупована. Бабця питає, куди ж їй їхати. Мовчу. Вночі прибуваємо до Кривого Рогу. Поїзд далі не їде. Звільніть, будь ласка, вагони. Шкодую, що нема те. Це її місто. На вокзалі кооперуємо з якимось мужичком, хлопчиком та бабцею. Ловимо таксі до автовокзалу, мужичок питає, скільки до Миколаєва чи Херсона. 5-6 тисяч. Мене підбирає Волга. В ній сім'я, на передньому дочка вголос читає новини. Я прибув в частину, але це ще не кінець другого дня. В частині мене ще пам'ятали, хоч пройшло вже 7 років. Принаймні декілька офіцерів. Поки мене оформлювали в підвалі, почалася тривога. Ніби не повітряна, а так, що ворог близько. Допоміг дістати декілька жорстких дисків, закопали. Пожалів, що не взяв викруток. Мене не встигли перевдягти, об'явили шокування. Думав, стати в цивільному не дозволили. Передягнувся в форму, що в мене залишилася. Зовні військовий, але під накидкою все цивільне. Холодно. Кинули під ноги бронік. Поки чіпляв, під'їхала машина з іншим офіцером. Дали автомат, пльотка в народі. І БК. Бронік не застібається. Затягнув якоюсь штукою по типу розгрузки. Виявилося, що потрібно його налаштувати. Так сумки не вдягнеш, просто треба знати як. Сформували загін резерву. Наступила ніч. Сидимо біля дежурки, холодно. Не їли. Сидимо на ящиках з-під зброї. Пустих. Принесли ящик гранат. Запалювачі, взривателі. В банках, по типу консервних. Ніхто не вміє відкрити штукованою в комплекті. Відкрили штик ножем. Кожному по 2 гранати да по 2 запалювачі. В різні кармани не вкручувати. Йдемо в дозор, в поле, за інформацією можливий десант. Лежимо на землі, трусить від холоду страшно. Вдивляємось в темряву, ніц не видно. Чорне все та зірки виколюють очі. Згадую Маценко та її квантовий пейзаж, коли група лендартистів дивилася на пейзаж, щоб він не змінився. Тепер ми такі лендартисти. Дивлюся до галюцинацій. Не відрізнити зірків від безпілотника. Йдемо назад. Дуже щасливий. П'ємо каву на дежурці. Під ранок ліземо в підвал, на трубах лежать матраци. Лягаємо спати на них. Я ще без каски. Всі лежать, як є, спати в одязі і броніку само собою. Хтось лежить вище мене, півночі вовтузить ногами, б'є по голові. Так закінчився другий день війни.
Sergei Voinovich, Mykolaiv-Kyiv. The second day of the war. Extract. We are at a changing station, waiting for the train. It's delayed for 1 hour, 2 hours, 3, 4, 5. We sleep in shifts. Dad switches to Ukrainian, I follow. I'm sending audio messages to her to let her know how I sound. She laughs and says I sound good. I get one last message from S from Bucha. She's asking me whether she should try to evacuate. She asks me to be in touch. The train arrives, but the final destination is not the city I need. Just to Kryvyi. And then it's all up to you. If that works for you, get in. I do. Half of the people on the train have their phones dead. The majority wants to go to Kherson or Kakhovka. Kakhovka is occupied. An elderly woman's asking where she should go in that case. I say nothing. At night, we arrive to Kryvyi. This is the final stop. Please leave the train. I regret T not being here with me. It's her city. At the station, we team up with some man, a boy and a grandma. We get the taxi to the bus station. There the man asks how much it would be to get to Mykolaiv or Kherson. 5,000 and 6,000 respectively. We don't have that money. The bus station is still closed, from a line in front of the doors to be the first to buy tickets when it opens. The boy has all his money on his phone. The phone's dead. The man buys a ticket for the grandma. I help the boy. More people are arriving at the station. Day is breaking. Eventually, the bus gets filled with people in bags, to the full. The road takes long as news about blockages of bridges arrive. I try to sleep. We arrive at Mykolaiv. Some people have no place to go. We hear news about the siege of Kherson, but some say it might be fake. I go to my parents' place. I take some more items from the uniform that managed to prepare some army boots and other stuff. Mom scolds me for smoking. I go back to the bus station. There are no buses running inside the region. I team up with some women. We get a taxi. One says she has COVID, but it's already been 14 days after recovery. I still wear a mask though, she says. After about 10 kilometers, I catch some local minibus. The passengers ask the driver whether he's going to be there tomorrow as well. To that, it just smiles. I get off the bus. The driver tells me to check whether my military unit is still there. 20 more kilometers to go. I bump into a column of military cars. I hide. Someone on a Volga gives me a lift. It's a family. The daughter on the passenger seat is reading the news aloud. I get to the units, but this is not the end of day 2 yet. It turns out they still remember me at the military unit, although 7 years have passed. At least some of the officers. While they register me in the basement, the siren goes off. Not an air one, it seems, but just an alert about the enemy. I help the officers to pull out some hard drives. We dig them up in the ground. I regret not taking any screwdrivers with me. I don't manage to get changed into the uniform as the military alignment is announced. I consider joining in my civilian clothes, but I'm not allowed to. I put on the bits of the uniform I have. Outside I look like a military man, but underneath I have my ordinary clothes. It's cold. A bulletproof vest is thrown at my feet. While I'm putting it on, a car arrives with another officer in it. I get a machine gun, people call it a whip, and a walkie-talkie. The vest doesn't zip, so I fix it with some kind of carrying system. Turns out the vest has to be set up to fit. You have to know how. A reserve unit is formed. Night comes. We're sitting next to the duty room. It's cold. We haven't eaten anything. We're sitting on the empty boxes that had weapons in them. Someone brings a box of bombshells. Also some exploders in a kind of aluminium cans. No one knows how to use that opener thing that comes with them. I open one with a knife. Everyone gets 2 bombshells and 2 cans with explosives. 2 per each, 1 per each pocket. We're going to patrol the territory. In the field, as far as we know, there might be a landing operation coming. We lie on the ground, shivering. Looking into the darkness, we see nothing. Everything is black, and the stars are piercing. That reminds me of Matsenko and a quantum landscape, when a group of land artists was watching the landscape for it not to change. Now we are such land artists too. I watch closely until I start getting hallucinations. You can't tell a star from a plane. We are going back. I'm very happy. We drink coffee in the duty room. At dawn, we go down to the basement. There are mattresses on the pipes. We sleep on them. I don't have a helmet yet. Everyone sleeps as they are, dressed. That's how it's supposed to be. Someone lying above me is tossing and turning for half a night, hitting me on the head with his feet. This is the end of day 2.
Євген Півень. Баштанка-Mykolaiv. Простір нашого маленького міста поранений та болить. Виглядаєш на двір, вдивляєшся в поки що тиху околицю, а вона наче обпалена. Це дуже фізичне відчуття. Десь у трахеї, у бронхах, у животі. Здається, що у мозку з'явилась нова ділянка, що підсвічується від вибухів та звуків, що на них схожі. Вона стає міцнішою, як мозоль, чи як пресовані шари ґрунту, де ти топчешся. А потім весь ти затиснений в кулаці камінь, що болить. Не через силу, а, здається, самою силою. Я зараз намагаюся осягнути ненависть, з якою прийшов на нашу землю ворог. Темну, наївну, тупу. Ненависть, яку транслюють рашистські покидьки, кровожерливі церковні тварюки, що бризкають слиною, дешеві пропутінські графомани, усілякі прилєпі небільченки Долгарьову, Дімідови. Ця їх ненависть така ж проста, з таких же гівна і палок, як їх творчість. Вона не складна та дешева, як протерта попса, як тупий тимчасовий ніж, що тоне у водах забуття, а на його місце приходить інший, не менш тупіший. Наша ненависть сильна, жива, вічна, складна. Ми маємо це право, а вони ні. Вони захлинуться нею, як слиною, як літерами та рядками, якими вони не вміють користуватися.
Yevhen Piven, Bashtanka-Mykolaiv. The space of our small town is wounded and hurts. You peek outside and peer into yet quiet surrounding, and it feels like baked. It is a very physical feeling, somewhere in the trachea, in the bronchus, in the abdomen. It seems that a new part appeared in the brain that lights up from the explosions or similar sounds. It's becoming harder, like a callus, or compressed layers of soil, where you step over and over. And then all of you are a stone jammed into a fist that is hurting. Not by force, but it seems with the force itself. I am currently trying to grasp the hatred with which our enemy came to our land, dark, naive, dumb. Hatred that is translated by Russian scumbags. Blood-hungry church brutes that sputter, cheap reputing graphomaniacs. All sorts of Prilyepins, Belchenks, Dolgaryov, Demidovs. Their hatred is as primitive, made of the same shit and sticks as their art. All of it is simplistic and cheap, like tacky pop, like a blunt temporary blade that sinks in the waters of oblivion and is replaced by another one, no less blunt. Our hatred is powerful, vital, eternal, complicated. We have a right to it, and they don't. They will choke on it like on their own spittle, like on the letters and lines that they are unable to use.
And so we thank Serhiy Vojnalovic and Ivan Piven for their testimonies, and also Jan Bashinsky and Florence Diaz for their readings. And we will now share with you another point of view. Here is another testimony, another way of speaking and through images. And let's now watch a video made in early March by sculptor and media artist Ivan Svitlychnyi, who lives in Kharkiv. This video was presented as part of the exceptional assembly Solidarity with Ukraine, organized by the Centre Pompidou on the 9th of March in partnership with the collective Beyond the Post-Soviet and Initiative for Practices, Visions of Radical Care and La Maison de l'Ours. Thank you to Ivan Svitlychnyi to have shared with us this artistic work. And we are entering now in our conversation. And for this conversation, so you will participate from your own situated knowledge, and for Pascal and Laurence for the Relais Culture Europe from their perspective, the perspective of European political cultural issues, and for the Beyond the Post-Soviet collective, also from your own position and your own knowledges. Or perhaps, I don't know if Yulia, Patricia, Sasha, you would like perhaps to add or complete something regarding also your own position and your own knowledges regarding this situation. Perhaps Sasha?
Yes, thank you very much, Vincent. Maybe I would also like, right before, to make a short introduction to explain a bit more the choices for this meeting. So when we received the invitation to co-organize this event related to the ongoing war in Ukraine, we had discussions with you, between us, with our guests on our role. So what is our role in making the voice from Ukraine heard and listened to? And more importantly, what should be done in order to make the words which are being pronounced and heard understood? What can we learn from these words, and what words that we are used to saying should we actually unlearn? So the present cycle, as you said, is called Mapping the Next Steps, Listening to the Conflict. And for us, I think one of the answers about the next steps, in fact, lies behind. or to borrow the words of a historian and decolonial thinker, Ariela Aisha Azulay, who is the author of Potential History and Learning Imperialism, in our decolonial thriving, we must not pretend we need to progress past progress. Russia's war against Ukraine is not an isolated case, but a logical continuation of centuries of Russian imperialism and Soviet colonial domination in this huge region lying between Europe and Central Asia. And many answers to today's war actually lay in the past. In the same way as we look at this history of violences with a critical eye today and using decolonial tools, we also suggest to approach, deconstruct, and then reconstruct our own vocabularies. We ask ourselves, what do we know about this history and how we speak about it? What if we double the attention to the words one uses to speak about the war, and about the place of Ukraine, its narratives and culture today, and try to understand what actually stands behind these words. Also, when language is sometimes not able to transport memory through time, what other nonverbal forms does memory take, and how is it possible to grasp them? And finally, we consider it important to lay the foundations for a common ground, in other words, to negotiate a common decolonial vocabulary, which will cross the diversity of our positions and knowledges. So that is why we suggested to transform today's program into an exercise of listening and an exercise of wording. We suggested to invite 3 speakers who are with us today, who are Lia Dostlieva and Andrii Dostliev and Alevtyna Kakhidze, to make contributions on the subject of Soviet and Russian coloniality and decolonial vocabulary. While the speakers will be talking, others will be actively listening and taking notes on the words which are used. And after each contribution, we will discuss them through these words. By the end of the meeting, we shall try to draft some common, but not necessarily consensual linguistic ground, a decolonial vocabulary, which will help us in relating different types of knowledges, of positions and temporalities that we represent. And as you suggested, Vincent, before this active listening part, let's share some information about our situation. How do we position? What is our position in relation to the topic of today, which means from where do you actually speak and where does your knowledge about it come from? So I will ask this question to everybody around the virtual table.
Thank you very much, Sasha. And so we go now more deeply also in the talks, in the conversation. And so a first entry point of our talks will be the contribution of 2 artists, and with the contribution of Lia Dostlieva and Andrii Dostliev. And so, Yulia, could you present these both artists, please? Yulia?
Yes, thank you. I will present Lia, and Patricia will present Andrii, if it's okay. So Lia, we met just recently due to the event. So only way I can introduce you is to take something that I have found on the internet. And my source was your website and those words that you have used to describe yourself there. So I have transformed them from the direct speech to the indirect one. Lia Dostlieva was born in 1984 in Donetsk, Ukraine. She's an artist, cultural anthropologist, and essayist. Primary areas of Lia's research include the issues of trauma, post-memory, commemorative practices, and agency and visibility of vulnerable groups. She's particularly interested in how trauma comes to language, in possibilities of representation of traumatic events, and in how difficult knowledge and difficult past can be described and visualized. As an artist, you work, Lia, across a varied range of media, including photography, installations, textile, sculptures, interventions into urban spaces, and etc. Since 2012.
Thank you very much, Yulia. And now I will invite Patricia to present Andrii Dostliev.
Yes. I will take the same position as Yulia, as I also read your biography, and I hope that we'll have more time to speak and to exchange after this meeting. So Andrii Dostliev is an artist, curator, and photographer, researcher from Ukraine, currently based in Poland. His area of research are memory, trauma, identity, both personal and collective, and the limits of photography as a medium. His work has been exhibited in Ukraine, Poland, Austria, and Germany, amongst others. And he also has published several books with his photography series. So I'm happy to have you here as well, part of this discussion, and hope we can discuss more after.
Thank you, Patricia. And now, yes, so we will invite Lia and Andrii to present their work. And also we'll invite the audience to follow this conversation. And all together we will share just after one word that makes sense regarding your intervention. So, Lia and Andrii, the floor is yours.
Hello. The full-scale war that Russia started in Ukraine highlighted the issues that at first glance might feel unimportant or irrelevant, namely the language and the wording we use when we are talking about Russia and Ukraine. But not only in the context of this war, but in the broader context, for example, when we speak about agency, culture, and history in general. So within the beginning of this active phase of the war, the urge to rethink Russian culture as a colonial and imperial project, the urge to rethink its colonial heritage, to find new approaches to certain cultural practices became more vocal. It became clear that we can no longer avoid the topic of decolonization. And when I'm saying Russian culture and its colonial heritage, what I mean is the Russian Empire, but also the Soviet Union, but also contemporary Russia. In the ways of thinking about colonial continuity, I believe that despite any political transformations that had happened to Russia, the nature of the colonial and imperialistic treatment of bordering countries or former colonies or former Soviet republics remains very same. And since we are talking here about words, it's worth mentioning that even the use of the word colonial is problematic because originally it reflected a slightly different experience, and Ukrainian post-colonial situation is not in every aspect repeating the patterns of Western empires. But despite the circumstances we are in are tragic, I think it's time to recalibrate our optics and our approaches and start to think about everything from a broader perspective. Russian culture and Ukrainian culture must be rethought through decolonial optics, and artists and culture workers are the exact persons to do so. As artists and researchers, we have been working with the issues of memory and historical trauma since 2015. And as Homi Bhabha once stated, memory is a necessary and sometimes hazardous bridge between colonialism and the question of cultural identity. Remembering, he writes, is never a quiet act of introspection or retrospection. It's a painful remembering or putting together parts of the dismembered past to make sense of the drama of the present. So in order to put in terms with our present and start the decolonial process, we should first reclaim our agency, rethink and retell our past with our own voices. The tragic story of Holodomor, genocide itself, and what happened later, I mean total suppression of the memory of those events, which lasted almost as long as the Soviet Union itself, is a very relevant illustration to that thought. It's a colonial power that decides what is to be remembered and in what particular way, if at all.
When we started to work on our project, I still feel sorry when I throw away food. Grandma used to tell me stories about the Holodomor. It was important to us to show the ways in which this almost century-old man-made famine is still being present among us, among people who are already the third generation of survivors. How to demonstrate traces of something which is utterly invisible. We were thinking about this presence of historical trauma in our everyday practices. And we decided that the feeling of shame which coexists with the necessity to throw away some food leftovers is the manifestation of this hunger-inflicted trauma. It was totally irrational, as we are not talking about sensible amounts of food that could be used later or somehow donated. It was just leftovers or spoiled food, but we felt ashamed anyway when we threw it away. And we created a sort of a visual diary where we logged every piece of wasted food for 3 months. Technically, this process can be described this way. Before sending any piece of food to the trash, we covered it with black ink and made a print on paper. Then we recorded the date and what exactly we threw away. Also later we added tiny pieces of landscape photos. You can see that it's a landscape on the photo, but it's too tiny or too blurry to tell what exact place it might be or where. You can just guess that it could be somewhere in Ukraine. And those tiny parts of the photos are here in order to demonstrate the lack of famine's traces in the landscape. Because unlike many other collective traumas, which have exact geographic locations and are present in the landscape in the form of places of memory, Holodomor left no trace, as it happened virtually everywhere in the countryside, but commemoration was strongly forbidden. So, as Lia mentioned earlier, in order to decolonize our culture and our history, we need to bring back erased parts of it, to recontextualize them and find them a place in a new Ukrainian narrative. And one more project I will tell you about is called the Soviet Ukrainian Photography of the 1930s. This project was the attempt to uncover the lost history of vernacular photography in Soviet Ukraine that became involved in the Soviet repressions of the 1930s and caused the images to change their function from being innocent family portraits or amateur snapshots to being evidence materials in criminal cases of the repressed persons. And often these photos were destroyed during the criminal process. So my idea was to collect these traces of images destroyed or withdrawn from circulation and bring them back into the symbolic field of photography. I've been collecting all the words from the criminal cases in archival materials that describe these lost photographs and rare images that have preserved in this case files, and rephotographing them again, either as images or as text fragments where images were not available, with the Polaroid camera to give them this feeling of a family snapshot again. It's obviously an impossible effort in terms of the images itself and their functioning as images, but what I was aiming for was also to show the colonial gaze that these images were subjected to and which had imprinted in them. And looking at these images now requires a conscious reversal of this colonial gaze.
So we started to work on this project a few years ago when the war was already happening, but it was still not the full-scale invasion that we experience today. And what is common for both projects we mentioned and became very relevant now is the notion of traces, the notion of history, memories, and imagery which are suppressed by the ruling power. So we work with uncovering these traces in order to make them visible, or at least to mark the void where our own history, memories, and imagery should be. And as recent discoveries of Russian war crimes against the civilian population on temporarily occupied territories had shown the words traces and void will stay with us for a while. And back to what? One more word that we need to deal with in this context is Russophobia. Despite its obvious, even grammatical inconsistency, this word is becoming more and more widespread. It's often used by the media, by the politicians, by social media users, even by academics. And it became a convenient method of silencing and compartmentalizing critical voices. The call for decolonizing Russian culture, the critique of the Russian political course, of the ongoing war, even the evidence of very recent war crimes in Bucha, Irpin, Hostomel, and so on, are often called Russophobic. And after this word, any further dialogue becomes impossible. The word has been successfully instrumentalized and weaponized by Russian government and propaganda media. And we need to find a way to deal with it. I don't know, to understand it as a new form of the Godwin law or something, to disarm it, to make sure it cannot be used as a weapon anymore.
Thank you, Lia and Andrii. And will it be possible perhaps to Alevtyna, an artist, with us, perhaps to react also to regarding this first artistic intervention from Lia and Andrii? Yes, just a second, because we can't hear you just now. Will it be possible perhaps to refresh your screen, please? Just a second. Yeah, could you refresh the pages, please, Alevtyna? Perhaps Sasha, could you introduce Alevtyna the time that Alevtyna refresh her screen? Thank you. Yes. Yeah.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you very much, Vincent, and also thanks very much again, Lia and Andrii, for the contribution that you did. So Alevtyna Kakhidze, who will join us in a couple of moments, is an artist who works with multiple media like drawing, text, and time-based works. Alevtyna was born in Zhdanivka in the Donetsk region of the Ukrainian Soviet Socialist Republic, and now she's based in Muzichi, which is the western suburb of Kyiv. Alevtyna Kakhidze grew up in Donetsk, which since 1991 was part of the independent Ukrainian state. She studied at the National Academy of Arts and Architecture in Kyiv and the Jan van Eyck Academy in Maastricht. And since 2018, she is a special envoy for tolerance of the United Nations. So Alevtyna has been observing the transformation of Ukraine since the Soviet period, passing by the chaotic 90s and up till today. And she has also been closely following the war that Russia started in Ukraine in 2014 by occupying Crimea and the part of the Ukrainian east, and which pursued this year with a full-scale military invasion. And Alevtyna Kakhidze has been following the development of the war as a witness, but also, of course, as an artist, reflecting on it from the very beginning, questioning its consequences on people and on culture, and highlighting with artistic means the ways in which information on war circulates through media channels and social networks.
Thank you, Sasha.
Hello?
Yes, Alevtyna, yes. We can hear you now.
Oh, great. I will try to share my screen. Give me a sign.
Yes, it's coming. Just a few seconds. Yes, it's working now.
Oh, great. I would like to start with 2 pages of Wikipedia of Malevich. One page is actually Ukrainian and another page is Russian. So at the right, you see Russian page of Wikipedia, and then you will read that Malevich is actually a Russian artist and Soviet one. And Ukrainian page, you will read just that he is the Ukrainian one and he has a Polish. So they're different, you can see. If you don't mind, I will give you homework just to check what is the Wikipedia in your country about him.
Yes, Alevtyna.
So you would say that it would...
Yes, will it be possible you switch off your camera for a better internet connection, please? Because we can't hear you so very well. Yeah, no. Could you...
Underneath the private chat? Okay. Underneath the private chat, you have... okay, just click the camera. Okay. Okay.
Alevtyna, yes, could you just come back to sharing your screen? Alevtyna, could you speak, please? Could you refresh your page, Alevtyna, please? Sorry for these technical issues.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. So it's fine. And could you just, now share your screen, please? Yeah, it's coming. Yeah, okay.
So as I mentioned that pages about Malevich are different in Ukrainian and Russian. And I already have given some homework to all of us just to check what is written in Wikipedia in your country. Of course, you will tell that Wikipedia is written by people. It's not by intellectuals or academics. Okay, but still, please check it. Then you would say, oh, it would be amazing if we could know what Malevich actually was thinking about his identity. And be honest, I found what he wrote in a letter. Let's check. So this is the letter which was written in summer of 1932, actually 3 years before he died. And in this letter was written, I no longer want to be a Ukrainian. What kind of nation is this, which has defiled all conscience and tact? It doesn't matter what the letter says, it was so much about how he was thinking about himself. When you say that you are not longer want to be a Ukrainian, it means you identify yourself as a Ukrainian. So I put the fragment of his letter on the table to discuss this. Let's shift to another example, which is related not such a great artist, just to me. It's about me. It is a story which took place 8 years ago in 2014, when I actually took part in Manifesta. Can you hear me, guys?
Yes.
Oh, great. So it happened when I was at Manifesta 2014. I was invited there to take part, and also Boris Mikhailov. We were 2 Ukrainians in the project. And I act as an international artist, and of course, I communicated in English. I never showed that I do speak Russian, and I haven't checked anything was written in Russian. So, and my CV was prepared for the catalog in English, and there was a sentence, and this sentence was, she was raised with Russian culture, which actually basically a truth, because I was born in Donetsk region, I finished Russian school, my mother tongue was Russian, and I grew up with Russian culture, literature, and other things. So we actually put this sentence in my CV, and then I saw the catalog with the Russian translation of it, and this sentence, she was raised within Russian culture, was translated culturally, ethnically, she is Russian. I also put this case on a table to discuss what actually happened. I tried to figure out myself, I was very mad. I went to the Department of Publishing and asked the head who actually translated my English sentence in this way in Russian. And the woman who was from Spain, she said, 8 people, they are all Russian. So it's again about collective responsibility, who translated in this way. To my opinion, the translation is broken. So let's maybe go closer to Russia context. So next image, it's actually about Russia. You will see in red a small piece of land, which is actually the place of a small nation or ethnic group, which called Nensi. It's Arctic Russia. And recently I figured out that 2 Ukrainian artists, now of course this is the case, maybe I was wrong to say 2 Ukrainian artists, maybe 2 Soviet artists from the territory which is Ukraine now, or maybe 2 Soviet artists from Soviet Ukrainian Republic or something like this, or maybe just names. Their names, Ada Rybachuk and Volodymyr Melenchenko, if to be accurate. So they travel in this territory which marked in red many, many times, like during 8 years. Ada Rybachuk, she died 10 years ago. Vladimir Melenchenko is still alive. And he said to me, we love this area. We became friends with people over there. So next slide is actually shows how they are together. Ada and Volodymyr, they are in white, and the rest of people you see in the ethno costumes, Nancy. And at the right, you will see amazing monotypia by Ada. So they also became people who made many, many drawings of them, portraits and how they in costumes, or even I would say they became anthropologists of them. Volodymyr said to me that they admired these people, and I will give you some proof. So here you will see on the top the building, which is actually does exist in Kyiv. This is a halls of fire well near crematorium in Kyiv. And on the bottom, you will see actually the typical house of Nancy. And if you just look on these 2 images, you will see something very alike or similarity. So this space of the building above, between of these 2 actually fragments of this building, will remind you the building of Nancy, which called Chum. Volodymyr said that they were working for this building, which called Halls for Firewall near crematorium. They wanted somehow to transform the houses of Nancy into this building. And then I found many, many notes of Ada in her diary about those houses Nancy had, they called Chum. So I will read it, just it's in English, translated by Yulia, thank you so much. Chum, tent, is the most widespread type of portable dwelling used by Siberian folk. Its shape is exponential in a tundra, while snow is rolling down from its slip surface without being trapped. That is why rolling chum could be easily dismantled without cleaning or shoveling snow. Above the head, in the dwelling, in its closed and seemingly limited from the space, bordered from Vane's environment of the human house, one can always see above the head of unglassed stars, sun, sky, harp. Harp is actually something which is really related to the religion of Nancy. And unglassed stars is not just metaphor. So in their house, I mean Chum, they never had something which reminds glass or something could be carved from the outside. So just basically a hole. Ada and Vladimir, they actually describe in their diary how the houses of Nancy Chum were actually removed from their life. So then you can see another note of Ada when she described that Chum is going to be replaced by Balak. This is some box with a door and window and stove iron pipe which could be put on tractor and removed somewhere. So basically they were depicting the life of Nancy. And now, if you check what is going on with this community, you will not find any chum, and it will be only oil production by Chernomerdin. So, but let's go to Ukraine at the time. Near this halls of firewall, Ada and Volodymyr also wanted to produce a memory wall, huge wall. They were working for 8 years to make it. You will see it's absolutely beautiful. They even created their own way how to do that. But on March 21 in 1982, the wall of memory began to be powdered with concrete. The same workers who had previously erected the wall were sent to carry out such a task. By May, the piece that had taken artists so many years, 8 years, to complete was buried under 950 cubic meters of concrete. I know you're shocked. This is how it looks like now. It's recent photo. It's actually done by my friends. What happened? The decision from Moscow went to Kyiv, and it was written something like the principle of the formation of Soviet architecture have been turned upside down, and any rationality of its foundation has been crossed out. At the left, you will see a photo of Ada Rybachuk when she was young. And there was also a KGB note that the artist has an idea to burn herself if the decision to kill the art, I mean this memory wall, will be not cancelled. She didn't do that. She just wrote that the world became black and white, not colorful anymore. Yeah, it's a sad story, and I will show you another picture. It will be kind of happy end. This picture was done in 2021, just a few months before this bloody attack from Russia to Ukraine. So actually the foundation of Ada Rybachuk and Vladimir Melnichenko, by the way, Vladimir Melnichenko is alive, you can see him at the right. So he is 90 years old man. So we fundraised money and asked amazing people from engineering side to took the reliefs from this concrete. The quality of this concrete, which was used by Soviet authorities in that time was so bad. So you can see that their amazing work was taken out, but it's still not all. It was conservated for winter, but still I think it's just the amazing thing of our own colonial studies or act of decolonization, not just theory, just really act of practice. So next image, just my drawing. I was producing during the war, but of course it's not correct to say the war because it's just second part of our war. The war started in 2014 in April from Slavyansk. But anyways, so this image is about that Russian culture is looking for an alibi, that it's not a killer. Of course, you can criticize this image, what I actually produce. You can see Dostoevsky and Tolstoy, you can see Asmalovsky work, you also can see Russian avant-garde with Malevich now, just please think about, and also Brodsky. And so this is the drawing. And then the next drawing is also just new one, and you're the first who saw this drawing because I produced yesterday. It's so much about canceling Russian culture. I'm saying this is a medicine. And Ra makes, or I don't know how to translate it, piyavki. So when it's so many cases set to actually examine what is about. It's about economic things to make Russia or Russians or Russian state or Putin Russia, I don't know what kind of words, it will be accurate, weaker, economically weaker. Then also time, what I'm talking about, time. Since 24 February, I was locked in my studio and I was trying to save my life, don't produce the things I planned to do, go to Estonia because it was planned for something else, also pack my works. So I didn't function as an artist. So I lost my time. This is also means that other Russian artists, they had time to function as an artist. I didn't. So this is unfair to measure us in the same level. Then content. This is more close to what we are talking about now. I mean that unfortunately Russians or Russian intellectuals or academics, they didn't make their homework nicely. Russian literature included Pushkin, Brodsky, and many other literature actors, and also, I'm sorry, it's my dog is barking, and other artists. So we didn't examine, or they didn't examine on the principle that it's colonial or maybe Ukrainophobic or something like this. And the last snake is irrational. What I mean, sometimes when I hear Russian accent, I became mad. Maybe I'm sick a bit, but still I have to tell it as an artist. It's my reflection. Thank you guys for your attention.
Thank you very much, Alevtyna. Yes, also to the artist to have share with us all these materials, and also we would like us to start our conversation with by exchanging regarding yes the words that we have taken each person regarding the different intervention. And perhaps we can start by the beyond the post-Soviet collective. I don't know if we can keep it open. I don't know if Patricia or Yulia, which word have you taken regarding all the material you have?
Thank you.
Would like to start? Yes, Yulia. Yes.
Yes, I think this is also kind of the way we did our exercise today. So I took at least 3 words from Lia and Andrii, and these words are void, traces, and Russophobia. But also I wanted to add the voice shame, and I'm so grateful also that you were so open and that you shared also this word to us, because I could relate to. And even though the history of Holodomor was was almost erased within the official historical narration in Russia. I must say, I learned somehow unconsciously from the childhood also to not to throw food, and especially bread. And was like also feeling shame, and still kind of teaching my husband in Switzerland not to throw food, and especially bread. I think this is and I take these words: void, traces, Russophobia, and shame.
Thank you very much, Yulia. And now perhaps Patricia, if you want to share with us your words.
Yeah, I think what we kind of have from Alevtyna presentation is this notions of positions from where we speak, and that Sasha actually also mentions in his introduction. So from where we speak and to where we speak. And I think from the audience, we had also kind of a remark on the difficulties of the translations about the Wikipedia page, what can be done in terms of positioning, what are the challenges also that the internet are also challenging to us, which position, which informations we should reset or we should rethink in order to get informations. And I think, yeah, what Alevtyna said is very important. And we also had this conversation already, I know, with the collectives about looking at the decoloniality of the art history, of the thoughts, and relooking about all the knowledge that we have. And I would keep that in mind from Alevtyna interventions, but also from the previous interventions that we had the opportunity to have with you. And I will keep that in mind, I think, for the next steps.
Thank you very much, Patricia, yes, for your words. And now we go to Sasha. Could you also present your selection of words?
Yes, thank you very much, Vincent. Before that, I would also like to say a few words about the knowledge that I have, from where it comes from which position I'm talking. So I grew up with mixed origins. Let's say half of my family comes from Ukraine, half of my family comes from Russia. And I was born in Moscow, and I lived for 20 years in Moscow, and a third of my life I have been living in France. And I think when I think about words and language, it was something which has been very important for me as a child in our family. Today, in a way, I feel that other languages have been taken away from me or stripped away from me, because I remember, so when I was a child, I was living with my grandparents. I think it's a very usual habit to give little children to their grandparents, and they were people who were born in Ukraine and grew up in Ukraine, and sometimes they were using different words that I could not understand or that I found different. And I'm remembering this today, that I already was a bit suspicious about these words. I was not understanding them, or had doubts about them. And I also remember some stories about language, or about the accent, for example, about my mother, who was born in Luhansk and who came to Russia when she was 13 or 14 years old. And I remember her telling the story that she had a, let's say, Ukrainian accent in Russian, and that she was bullied at school, and that she started to hate herself and started also to hate her family for transmitting her this accent. And this is also maybe which is in the roots of her of her way of thinking today. So yes, this is just to situate the knowledge that I have. And of course, I'm very now I have been working for many years on the question of Soviet coloniality and decolonial thinking. So for the words, I also took the note from the words from Lia and Andrii's contribution, and I wrote for such words as shame, shame, of course, trauma, no trace, lack of traces, the traces that are being destroyed in the Soviet times, erased traces, and the question of reversal. I think the way we are taking these steps back, we look behind, we get back to the stories that have been erased, and we try to understand also how these stories can be transmitted in time. And I also noted Russophobia. And concerning Alevtyna's contribution, I wrote the word Nenets. Nenets, if I'm not mistaken, so Nenets comes from the native language of this indigenous population which live on the Russian territory, and Nenets means in the Nenets language means people, if I'm not mistaken. And it's an interesting way that we took these words that says people to identify this population. And also the word chum, which is absent from other languages and which describes this moving house. And I think it's important when we speak about Nenets, indigenous population, to have this idea of movement, because this population were nomads, and a part of the Soviet colonial project was also to take this nomadism away from them and to inscribe them in education system, economical system, etc., where nomadism was not accepted. And it was also part of the colonization process. And in front of chum, I have this image of concrete and the word concrete that we used. Concrete is one of the materials for monumental buildings, for monumental monuments in the Soviet Union, I think. Also concrete, which has been used a lot in buildings as a cheap material, in cheap housing. And I also learned not so long ago that actually some of the like building techniques with concrete were bought by Khrushchev in France. So this also gives a different layer. Yes, so this the word concrete and the idea of concrete recovering some erasing something that has been done, and idea of concrete as something of cheap, bad quality that can also be taken away, as you showed with the story of the monument. I think that's it for me. Sorry for being too long.
No, thank you very much. Thank you once more, Sasha, for your selection and also the explanation of all the context. And also, it's interesting that you have also selected words from different languages. It's also very important. And now I would like to invite my colleague Laurence. What are your reactions and perhaps your own selection of words?
Coming from my perspective, it's to say, looking at it from maybe as we said at the beginning, the question of European cultural issue, etc. And just also to say, because Sasha was saying about its background, and just to say that I'm coming from a totally Western background, and that all the type of things that we are speaking about today are very at never moment, at any time in my educative, for instance, background, etc., I had touch with it. So it's interesting also because I think it's we are talking about invisibility, etc., and we see that when you are growing up in such a context, you have a lot of things that are completely invisible regarding Eastern perspective, but maybe also many different ways to think about coloniality, domination, etc. And what for the words, I have invisible, I have traces, I have case file, and I have practices of decolonization, because what regarding this, it's we have been accustomed to really take attention to things that are really visible, buildings, etc. And but maybe the most important thing is that intangible things have a materiality and have consequences. And that's why for me it was interesting to have this question of traces, this question of case file, regarding also the fact to document this invisible damage, and maybe to think also about how can we, regarding this question of practices of decolonization, how can we act, and how artistic and cultural practices in their own integrate this question of decolonization, counter-narrative, counter-monuments, etc. That's why my words.
Thank you very much, Laurence. And now I will invite our colleague Pascal to share with us selection of words.
Yes. Like that, as I've introduced, I'm more focused on how we could produce new frame for politics and cultural policy. And I really try to herb this morning through this frame, through this filter of which kind of policy we could imagine, which kind of policy we need. Because we are in a moment where we know that we have to change deeply the way of supporting art, the way of supporting a kind of narrative through art. And it's difficult because we have all this Euro-Franco-centrism, and it's necessary to go in another completely other directions. So my feeling was we can't erase. The first point, it's we can't erase. I understand fully what you want to say when you are talking about erase, but we can't erase. Always the past will arrive through another way, through another direction, and erasing it, I think it's really we need to create a public space to critics, and I think this is really important. Not erasing, but really face the necessity to have this critics place, place where we could talk about, where we could really have this necessary vital critics regarding the stories, regarding what happened, regarding what are the process behind, regarding deeply what is going on. The second thing I'm thinking about, it's we can't do with something we don't know anything, and it's really I think the problem in the Western part at this moment. It's we really don't know anything about a lot of things, because we have built a kind of story where a kind of narrative where we didn't take care of the other representation, the other way to go through the historical present moment. So I think the base of maybe a kind of new European policies, it's for culture, is certainly around these two things. How we could create, I could say, safe spaces where we could really critique, where we could really produce new knowledge, but also new critics regarding the situation, regarding, and through different disciplines. Obviously, all the artistic disciplines, but also with this connection, it was quite interesting, the two interventions, because it's really something we are looking to the past with a kind of very precise approach to create a link with art, and how art could take also these histories. Also, it's certainly critic space where we could have a great interdisciplinary approaches. The second point for these public policies at this moment, for me, could be in this, we need this place, and now through this place we could support more flexible and permanent contradictory of reasonable approach. So it's a little bit complicated to explain this in English for me, but it's really I think it's Lia, you talk about Omi Kababa. It's really something we need. Listen to the colonial and the anti-colonial, and I think it's really important to have this kind of really strong critical place and strong and very documented place where we could do this. So for me, the words was something about decontamination, unlearning, archives. Yes, all these words indicated where it's really obvious that we have to build these critic places.
Thank you very much, Pascal. And I think that Lia has to leave in a few minutes. I think that Yulia, you have perhaps a question to Lia.
Thank you. I have just one question, but also if Lia has something different to react on, it's this question can be left also for kind of general discussion. The question that stuck in my mind, what words maybe you heard today, Lia, already, or maybe you were hearing or reading before that we have to unlearn to use?
Yeah, thank you. It's really difficult, maybe an even tough question, because I believe that all words are good. It's not a question of what the words are, it's more like how do we use them. So I think we have to be more cautious with our usage of words, because it's more about what we are trying to communicate with those words, not about the words as they are. Yeah, and we also noted some words from Alevtyna's speech. I choose the word time because all processes Alia was talking about are really lengthy. And we were hearing about something which happened really long time ago, but we are still feeling the consequences today. And some people are already dead, some are still alive, but the story is still going on. And all these processes we are talking about here are longer than human life, let's say. So I think we also need the word time here. Yeah, thank you. I think that's all from my side.
Thank you very much, Lia. And now I would like to invite Andrii, perhaps a few words of reactions regarding the exchange that we have just had.
Yeah, sure. I took note of the word ethnic or ethnicity from Alevtyna's speech, and it's something we should address because it often clouds what we are actually talking about, because sometimes it's introduced in the conversations, contemporary ones about Ukrainians and Russians, without a complete understanding maybe that we are not talking about any ethnicity in regard of the ongoing war. It's the political nations that are fighting each other, not the ethnicities. It's something that we should remember. And another word I took note of is post, as in post-Soviet or post-colonial. And to me it is a direction of our gaze which is directed backwards, and maybe we should think about looking also forward, not looking only at the consequences of Soviet or of colonial, but at what can be done for the future. And the future is not post something, it's pre something, maybe. And the final word is also Russophobia, because it's something that we have to deal with as a word and as a notion. And I'm having this thought, it's still very much raw and maybe a bit controversial, but as a queer person that has lived with the idea of reappropriating words like queer or German schwul, and to making them not derogatory, but something that we use to describe our communities. Maybe the same or a similar process could go with the word Russophobia. But as I said, it's still very raw thought. And that's probably all from me.
Thank you very much, Andrii. And now I would like to invite Alevtyna, to share with us perhaps your last remarks and regarding this, the exchange and our talks. Alevtyna, please. I think we can't hear you. Could you perhaps again refresh your web page, please? Just a few seconds. Alevtyna is connecting again. Yes, sorry once more, yes, for these technical issues. We do our best with our different guests, yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes, it's fine, thank you. Yeah, it's working.
Yeah, great. From the beginning, there was this word conflict, which always make me in the situation that I was almost going mad, but still we agreed that it's safe place and we just discuss. Conflict is good word because conflict is so much about that some identity is broken and then could be new identity. And when we use conflict in the situation we have in Ukraine, it's not conflict because it's nothing to do about breaking identity of two sides. It just, even before we were saying that it was war, but now we don't think this was almost armed genocide or something like this. I'm sorry for this. And since I feel that when I'm also hearing, we don't understand, it's so difficult for us. When I hear this, even sentences, I understand the speed is such a different. So since you don't have time to understand what is happening in Ukraine or what is happening between Russia and Ukraine, what happening in history of Russia in relation to Ukraine, we are going so fast, I mean, Ukraine, that is, when we are talking, it's like 50 people already were killed. 30 people were killed in Kramatorsk and something like 20 people were killed in Kharkov on a train station. When I was talking to you, I was reading the messages from my friends. So I don't want to scare you. I don't want to really say something bad in this territory, which is already, we have decided it's kind of safe place and we are going to discuss. I just wish myself energy, not to be tired of explaining. But I also must tell you that we are not explaining something to Westerns or to you. So we are in our own speed. Actually, I already said goodbye to my own life. Maybe.
Yes, sorry, Alevtyna, yes, we have again a problem with the sound. Sorry, yeah. Perhaps if you could refresh again your screen for the final. Yeah. Yes, you are coming back.
But can you just remind? Yeah, I'm here. Can you just remind where you stopped hearing me?
Yeah, it's fine. You can go.
I don't realize now where.
You wish yourself not to be tired from explaining. I think that was.
I just wanted to say that there are two different speeds. So speed of Ukraine about escalation, and the speed of people who are not in Ukraine or not related to Ukraine so deeply, who are in another speed to understand us. So this is again the new word speed for me, but it was not said, but I just realized this is so important to put it on the table.
Thank you, Alevtyna. So I don't know if any of our colleagues or partners would like to give final remarks regarding our conversation on our talks. I don't know if Patricia or Sasha, perhaps? Or Pascal?
No, I'm just convinced that we have to continue, and it's difficult to find a good, I don't know, to be satisfied, because we know that we are at the beginning of a long process. But we have really to continue this talk and this, because we really have to find the way to, I don't know, to have not only thought but also transformation of the situation. So we know that we need this place also in order to transform the situation. So I think we really have to know to continue this moment, or this how we could have a kind of more constant safe space and critical space where we could approach all this big issue.
Okay, thank you very much, Pascal.
And we have to do this just to say thank you for all our colleagues, because we try to understand the situation. We try to imagine how it's dramatic and difficult. And I think it's really important in this moment also to continue this space, or we could continue to talk malgré, to continue to talk malgré la situation. Yes.
Thank you, Pascal. And so we are arriving very progressively to the final steps of our session for this morning. And so I will go back shortly in French. And so I would like to thank you once more, yes, all our guests and artists regarding perhaps Patricia, would you like to add something?
Yes, I will add maybe one word about reconsidering our word, but also reconsidering our time. I think this is something that has been raised by all our speakers today, that the chronology of the events is important to reconsider as the history around the events. So reconsidering our words, reconstructing our narratives is also looking in the past and looking into I would say the chronology that we are living in. As it has been mentioned, most of us don't have the informations that have been produced for the past 8 years now. And it's important to look back in the past to reconstruct these narratives and to rebuild maybe a chronology that would be more appropriate with the decolonial language. That's it for me.
Thank you very much, Patricia. And we have also, yes, the opportunity, yes, to continue all our talks and exchanges in the next weeks and months. And so, yes, we are progressively coming back, yes, to the conclusion of our session. So I go back quickly, yes, in French. So voilà, en tant que Relais Culture Europe, et on était très heureux là de pouvoir échanger avec vous, avec le collectif Beyond the Post-Soviet, et également avec l'ensemble de nos artistes invités. Et donc c'est vraiment notre souhait de pouvoir continuer à ouvrir, à développer cet espace d'appui et de coopération en solidarité donc avec les artistes, les créateurs, les organisations culturelles et ukrainiennes. Et donc nous aurons l'occasion également de continuer à d'autres moments et dans d'autres espaces aussi de pouvoir approfondir en fait les points qui ont été évoqués ce matin collectivement. Et donc toujours dans cette démarche voilà, de continuer à trouver peut-être des réponses de solidarité, de coopération possibles avec les acteurs et les actrices culturelles ukrainiennes et ukrainiens. Et donc vous pourrez également retrouver l'ensemble des ressources voilà, qui ont été présentées donc, ce matin, donc des ressources dédiées à la situation en Ukraine, et donc notamment les enjeux culturels et sociaux donc de long terme que l'on souhaite développer. Et donc vous pouvez retrouver ces ressources sur le site internet du Relais Culture Europe. Et donc voilà, nous nous retrouverons donc bientôt pour de prochaines émissions de notre série de Mapping the Next Step. Donc continuez à suivre ces éléments donc, sur les réseaux sociaux. Vous pourrez également retrouver donc, le replay de cette émission sur notre chaîne YouTube. Et on voulait avant tout remercier l'ensemble des invités donc, de ce matin, donc le collectif Beyond the Post-Soviet, et donc tout particulièrement donc, Sasha Pevak, Patricia Couvet et Yulia Fisch, ainsi que les invités de la session de ce matin, donc Lia Dostlieva, Andrii Dostliev et Alevtyna Kakhidze pour leur témoignage et la présentation de leurs œuvres. Également Jan Bashynski qui a participé à l'enregistrement des témoignages, et également toutes celles et ceux qui ont contribué et travaillé à la préparation et la réalisation de cette émission, donc qui a été aussi co-organisée avec nos collègues du Relais Culture Europe, donc notamment Florence Diez, Mathilde Vasseur, Joaquina et également ici Ben au studio. Et donc on voulait également souligner que les actions du Relais Culture Europe sont développées avec le soutien de la Commission européenne, du ministère de la Culture et le Centre national du cinéma et les régions. Et donc en conclusion de l'émission de ce matin, nous vous proposons d'entendre en fait un dernier témoignage donc, réalisé en anglais, et donc qui a été enregistré par notre collègue Florence Diez. Et donc il s'agit du témoignage de Nastia Teor. Et cet enregistrement, donc depuis une zone de conflit, restitue le témoignage de Nastia Teor qui a été rédigé depuis Kiev, et que vous pourrez également reprendre en version écrite sur le site de février 24, février24.net. Merci de votre attention et à très bientôt. Merci à tous et à toutes.
Nastia Teor, Kyiv. Extract. Attention, air raid sirens in Kyiv. Day 1. On the second day of Russia's large-scale invasion in Ukraine, I had a feeling that I couldn't wake up. Everything felt surreal. Morning on the first day is imprinted in my body forever. I see it even now like a video very slowly looping in my head. My roommate R wakes me up and says that martial law declared in Ukraine and that Russian soldiers are bombing Ukrainian cities. I'm bursting into tears. We hug and I ask him, "Are you going to your job?" Only when I hear my words, I understand how stupid it sounds, because there is no job anymore. He lives with friends. My partner O is in another town with his family. I'm shocked, alone, shaken, completely disoriented, scared to stay, scared to leave, scared to move, and scared to stay in one place more than for 10 seconds. I watered plants before I left my home, but forgot to shut off the gas pipe. Video is ending here. Rest of the day, reading news, hearing the siren, the siren, the siren, texting with O, the siren is on, maybe because of 4 ballistic missiles launched from Belarus in the southwestern direction. Where is it? It's where I am. And every minute that I waited for those missiles to hit somewhere in southwestern direction lasted an hour. Everything was slowed down. It's kind of a time trap that I have experienced many times since that first attack. On this day, I lost senses of peace, safety, and home. Attention, air raid sirens in Kyiv. Nový vidlik, new countdown. Ukrainian words for February is luty, and it means fierce. On second day, or the 25th of luty, I felt less and less panic and fear, but more anger, rage, fury. There was more and more news about fierce Ukrainian soldiers and civilians successfully repelling the attacks of Russian war criminals, stopping tanks just with their bodies, and destroying Russian military equipment with Molotovs. I was texting with friends, and we all were telling each other how shocked and proud we are. I suggest that Ukraine was no longer a country with an inferiority complex to its older brother Russia, but finally strengthened her back. That was the time of adrenaline and euphoria. I lost all my projects and moved all files to folder peace and didn't open it once yet. New folder war was getting bigger every day with new pictures and text. I tried to find all possible ways to be useful. We were learning solidarity inside Ukraine, helping each other with requests which are absolutely new for us, like evacuations, bringing food to the subway, rescue a cat or a hamster from abandoned flats. Attention, air raid sirens in Kyiv. I was slowly learning how to live in wartime, constantly trying to find an answer to the question, should I leave or should I stay? I received dozens of messages with the same meaning. Leave now, before it's too late. The terror in Mariupol, Bucha, Rubizhne, Sumy, Borodyanka, and Hostomel, and many other places also was telling me the same. And my gut was telling me, stay. Otherwise, you'll go crazy. You will give up. Necessity to choose and answer this question every fucking day paralyzed my body. Week before this nightmare began, and air was already electrolyzed, I felt that my home is my body too. And for someone who was raised as a desireless object, to gain and save a body with agency and own will was also a question of survival. And now I made a decision to sacrifice the safety of this body in order to save my mental state. Was I saving myself or risking for nothing? Hard to say. I guess my body was already torn to pieces by Russian soldiers, and there was no way to save it in previous condition. I have chosen to stay. I must add, I had a privilege to choose.